is serious. Yes, because the next video has all the ingredients of a spy story staged in the early 1980s at the peak of the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union. Are you still with me? Well, let's begin. This is a story about a piece of jewelry. And yet, the piece of jewelry is not at the center of this tale, because the main protagonist is a man I label the man with the three identities. Oh. The first identity was that one of a tourist traveling in Europe once a year, of Russian immigrants working as a taxi driver in New York. For people who knew him better and did business with him, he was a diamonds and jeweler Jewish merchant, selling items that he was bringing from America, and he was selling to both small businesses and private clients, very much like my mom. That was his second identity. But after knowing him for years, 3 or 4 years, I built this third identity for him. And so once I share my theory, once we were having lunch with my parents, like we always used to do in the dining room, the 4 of us. My mom said, "Absolutely not. You have too much of an imagination." My dad, that was very much into politics, but he was a moderate that has always been shy from hyperbole. He said, "He could be." And for my sister, she said, "If he was, you wouldn't be smart enough to figure it out." And so I remember, I've been knowing him for 3 or 4 years. He was a family friend and a fiction. And so once we were having coffee, sitting on the lounge and on the armchair, and my beloved Aurelia brought coffee for him, my father, my mom, and myself. Point blank, I'll ask him, "Sasha, can I ask you a question?" He said, "Yes, of course." "Do you work for the CIA?" The room froze. And Sasha leaned forward, gave me the warmest of smiles, and looking straight into my eyes, he said, "I do, but please don't tell anybody, otherwise you get me in trouble." I was completely shut down. And my mom took over the conversation and business resumed as usual. And so, who was this mysterious character? Well, I can tell you that if he's still alive, and very much I would love him to be still alive, to see him again, he would probably be 93, 95 now. He was a short, chubby man, always wearing the most anonymous clothes, always wearing some sort of a coat, and always having one big bag, one small bag, and you always had a feeling that despite his chubbiness, there was always something else under his jacket. Whenever he removed the coat, the clothes looked cheap and not fitting him well. But sharp, he was sharp, and he was a charmer. And somehow he instilled immediately a degree of trust that you could do business with this man. And I remember few years later, he asked my mom if he could leave a large soft bag with us for just a couple of days, 48 hours maximum. My mom said like, yes, of course, Sasha, that's no problem. And guess what? Because my bed was like an old high bed, such a bag was placed in my bedroom under my bed. But Sasha had disappeared now for over a week. And so one day, whilst having lunch as usual in the dining room, I ask a question. And I say, can I ask all of you a question and each one of you can give me an answer? What do you think is in Sasha's bag? And before anybody could answer, my dad was quick to the reply. My dad, that he was well read in politics, a moderate, and always shine was hyperbole. His replies was like a dart who hit the center of the mark. He said, guns, cash, and a stack of fake passports. For all we knew about my father, there was no way in a million years that he had opened the bag and checked the content. So there was no doubt in us that he would just come up with a very quick answer. But this image was so vivid that we all laughed nervously and nobody else answered. And I couldn't put forward my theory on what was in this bag. The following day, Sasha reappeared and the bag disappeared. Those were the days. So what was the story of Sasha? Sasha was working as a factory worker in a factory outside St. Petersburg. But he was the smartest of a large family, all interconnected, of a Jewish clan. And the clan had decided to invest all this little money that they were making to pay for Sasha to be smuggled out of the Soviet Union. Sasha was so bright that despite being Jewish, they would immediately put you into a highly monitored minorance in the Soviet Union, and managed to progress into management. And so he knew everything that was happening with the factory, what was produced, what was stolen, what wasn't coming out right, what wasn't coming out at all. And that is the reason why the family thought he would be the perfect guy to get out. He had spent then escaping Russia, few years in Rome, in what was the biggest camp for asylum seeker coming from the Soviet bloc. And then, all of a sudden, he was granted access to the United States. He started working as a taxi driver. And he basically saved money. He worked like 18 hours, 19 hours a day. And his money were divided in 3 stashes. One smallest stash was for him to survive. And he said that many times at the beginning, he would actually sleep in the cab, and he would only rent a room for a couple of days in the cheapest hostel in Brooklyn in order to shower and change. The second stash of money was a deposit to buy his first property in New York. And this one was larger, obviously, than the one for living. And then there was a third stash. The third stash was to bribe the Soviet authorities to buy every single relative out of St. Petersburg. And through the years, he smuggled out 18 of them. Pain. But in this activity, Sasha was allowed to leave the United States multiple times a year. And let me tell you, those were not only the peak of the Cold War. There were also rumors that the Soviet Union could collapse any moment, and the only way for them to prevent that was to attack Europe. They had the biggest army of tanks. They never put money into the technological advancement of like weaponry. So they had all these thousands and thousands of tanks that were getting rotten. And they had this massive army that was actually doing absolutely nothing. And they saw that a way to maybe get a grip again with the country, like it happened many times through history, was to invade Europe. Europe, Germany, France, but Italy as well, was towards the end of a massive wave of terrorist attack on what in Italy were known as the Brigate Rosse, the Red Brigade. And even if some of those events have later been studied and analyzed as a potential false flag, so not an external job, but an inside job. The pressure in the public opinion was enormous. And people were checked everywhere. For us, for my mom business, as we would regularly go to Paris and we would regularly go to London, immigration and passport control was a real reality. Everything was checked. Everything was meticulously worked out. They will look at you. They got a feeling. So this idea that this Sasha could freely go in and out of the United States as a naturalized American that was born in St. Petersburg made it extremely suspicious. Also, what made it suspicious, certainly to the 15, 16 years old me, was the fact that my parents were living a highly social life, and we had a lot of parties. Sasha never wanted to be part of the parties. Even if he was in town in that afternoon, he would say like, no, 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 I have to go, I have to go. He was always extremely vague on like where he was going. My mom, for business reason, wanted to know, who else are you selling to? Oh, where are you going next? When are you coming back to us? When? You wouldn't know. Sometimes Sasha would appear at my mom's shop out of the blue, and my mom would quickly shut down the shop and took him to a little corner that she had to be seen, to see what Sasha had brought. And in some cases, Sasha would say like, no, no, I only show you at home. And even if we were living a relatively formal life, when we had somebody preparing lunch for us and we would have lunch every day in the dining room, Sasha was always there in the awkward time. Morning, middle of the morning, early afternoon. He would never stay more than 1 hour. And many times my mom asked him, oh, why don't you stay over? Why don't you spend a couple of days with us? You can go back and forward. No, no, I already have everything organized. But in the jewelry and all the objects that Sasha was selling to my mom, there was like a lot of American jewelry that he was selling, but there was also a lot of Russian stuff that was like extraordinary. I was present when once he brought a massive ball of silver, or highly decorated on the outside, on the 1818, 1870, with all the stamps. And he was weighing 4 or 5 kilos. I remember we have to weight this heavy, heavy ball, and we only had like a person scale. So like the 14, 15 years old me, I have to weight myself first, and then I step on the scale holding this cup. And Sasha would say, Anna Vittoria, you need to buy this, you need to buy this. But I remember it was already around what you would call the 20,000 US dollars, way out of my mom's budget for a single item, for something that in the eyes of my mom could create problems. She wasn't sure about the provenance. It was very much out of her league. 12 months later, we saw the ball on the Sotheby's catalog for a big auction, and it did sell back then for something like 1.8 million pounds. And probably if you have to look at that now, it would probably be in the $6, $7, $8 million US. Such was the piece. Another time where I was there, he brought a big box. In this box, covered in the most exquisite fabric, you open it out, and it was like a deep box and a wide box. Inside this box, you had the wedding dress of someone that, according to Sasha, was one of the nieces of the Tsar Nikolai. And he had a tail of 6 meters, and the whole dress was in perfect condition, put together after the wedding. It was all encrusted with pearls, completely encrusted with pearls. That also was very expensive. And the extraordinary things is that on the cover there was a little flap made in leather that would open up. And when you open up this little flap, you will have an old, obviously black and white photograph taken in a gelatin film of the time of this princess coming down the stairs wearing the dress. And according to Sasha, those stairs were some of the stairs in the Winter Palace of the Tsar. My mom also didn't have the confidence to put all this money into a single item. And we have never seen, we never known. But I remember we took it all out and we let the tail go for the full length of our living room, and it was like magnificent. And it's such a shame that at the time nobody had available something like a camera like this, like Sasha always had with him. So those wasn't the time. So I have this memory, but there is very little to show. And so with this story of Sasha, Sasha was basically going in and out of Russia, and he was bringing stuff out. And we were always asking, oh, do you have still relatives in Russia? Oh, what's happening? And we are talking about 1982, 1984. The story that he was telling us of the collapse of the society, the economics, and the industrial power of the Soviet Union were like very hard to believe, simply because the image that the Soviet Union had projected was the one of not only a military superpower, but somehow an economic superpower that would rival with like the United States of America. And like when my parents went there in the late 1970s, they took a tour. They were shocked when they went to the most famous shopping mall in Moscow to see that all the shelves were like empty. And when my mom asked, they had a minder. The minder said that they were going through, they were very sorry they were going through a refurbishment, and that's why all the shelves were empty. And when my mom shared the tale with Sasha. Sasha laugh. There is no such a thing as a refurbishment. There is nothing at all, nothing to buy. So that was Russia. So when then the Soviet Union very quickly collapsed, we immediately remember everything that Sasha had told us. And so the other things that I can tell about Sasha is that when I was in my early 20s, I met him once again in Italy, and I asked if I could see him if I went to New York. And he said like, yes, of course. They were very close. And it was sort of funny that in him being close with my parents, he was still sharing a story with some richness of details that would give you the clear impression that so much was untold. And so I remember I organized a meeting with him, and he took me to the Rockefeller Center. And this was like a very interesting little anecdote, full of people. It wasn't the weekend, and it wasn't winter, so they didn't have the ice skating. Full of people. He was all wearing his jacket, always wearing a hat. He didn't wear sunglasses, but you always had the impression, and he would move like this. And I also wasn't used. It was my first time when I went to New York to familiarize yourself with a huge mass of people. So that was like something. And what happened is, as I had him right in front of me, I sort of looked around, and the Rockefeller Center is marvelous. It totally disappeared, completely disappeared. And so I said like, where is it, Sasha, where is it? And I kept looking, I trying to see. And in a matter of like 30 seconds, he reappeared behind me. But what he had done, he had removed the hat, removed the scarf, removed the coat, turned the coat upside down, that he had a complete different color. And he says like, oh, come, let's go, today he's not good. And I say like, but Sasha, we just arrived here. He said like, yeah, I'm sorry, but there is somebody I don't want to see. And he hit me how quickly it changed, so that in a matter of seconds, I myself couldn't recognize him in that crowd. That was our friend Sasha. And for all the jewelry and the diamonds and the stones that he sold to my mom and then my mom would sell, he was a legendary character, because you'll never know. And I remember once he arrived and my mom said like, Sasha, I have no money, I just got back from London. Why you didn't tell me? I would have kept you know, some cash to buy from you. Oh yes, because with Sasha was only cash. And sometimes he would ask us to only bring the big cut, not the small change. But one of the items that my mom bought from Sasha is her. We called the Japanese lady. So this wonderful brooch is made of 18 carats gold. It has what in Italian called a perla scaramazza, as I had. Is what is known in the trade as a baroque pearl. Those are imperfect pearls that form naturally in sweet water, that if they come and they have the right colors, like they come from Tahiti, they're like, there was more than the real pearls. and is encrusted with diamonds. He has a little belt encrusted with rubies, and he has this little bouquet of flowers with tiny little stones and a couple of tiny little natural pearl. 1950s America. And this was the peak of Truman Capote, the peak of very much like the big family that were like running New York, the J.P. Morgan, the Rockefeller, the Mellon, you know, those were the people that were running New York, the bankers and the oil barons, and they wanted to build their own style. And so Truman Capote, of course, he had his own swans, and one of the swans was no other than Marella Agnelli, who was the wife of Gianni Agnelli, the owner of Fiat and then Ferrari, Alfa Romeo, all the brands, cars brand in Italy. But she was already a princess herself in her own right. So this is the type of stuff that they were wearing on the grand balls that you would have in New York. And here it is. And my hope is to meet Sasha again. And now maybe that is close to 100, he can unravel all the secrets of what he really was doing. Because the guy was no taxi driver. And the guy, yes, he was a diamond and jewelry merchant, but that was not his main profession. Wherever you are, Sasha, the name has been changed. My wish is to meet you again and ask that question. Do you work for the CIA? Ah.